This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Grace Belangia of the Clubhouse. Grace, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what was your background before investing in early stage companies, and what you did before this?
Well, I actually grew up in Silicon Valley in a community, obviously, that was surrounded by computers and technology and innovation. And now that I've been in Augusta, Georgia, I helped start the space about 7 years ago and turned basically a community into an opportunity for entrepreneurs to sort of start their company and scale it and provide access to funding and people with funding. And that really is part of what the Clubhouse is and does here in the Southeast.
Well, tell us more about how you build your local ecosystem there for entrepreneurs. You're in Augusta, Georgia, but tell us what's the best approach for that area?
Well, I think the thing that we found was when you build a community, and you have to go back, obviously, 6 or 7 years ago, a lot of it was around connecting those resources. And so the people were part of our community of hackers and makers and computer programmers and investors and our military community. And we really started out with doing hackathons and doing events and bringing them together. And then when we found that they had potential business models, we encouraged people to grow their companies. And that in turn allowed us to form a close-knit community where we all personally invested in a space, and then we broadened it to a nonprofit, and we've now expanded to over 240 members, and we occupy 7,000 square feet, providing mentoring and funding and networking and education for our entrepreneurs and our investors.
Well, great. So as many groups are trying to grow their entrepreneurial community, and there's something of an industry around that, how do you think that's going to evolve over the next 5 years? What changes do you see coming up, and what are the challenges you face today?
I think one of the great opportunities that we have is getting our companies and our people ready for scaling themselves up. So a lot of our education and our mentoring is connecting the resources that we have outside of our area, and then also educating our local investors as to why it's a good value to invest in the companies that are here. And so I think that the connecting is probably the most valuable thing that we offer to our members in the investment community. And I think one of the challenges for that will be the competition for people looking for limited resources if the financial situation evolves and there's not as much access to capital as we would like them to have.
Well, so do you have a fund? And if so, how does it work?
We have a small angel fund that we've helped take some companies through getting them to scale. We have a robotics company that we've worked with. It's not moving very much right now because of where we are in the education space. And then I think as we see ideas, we consider them. If we're not interested in them, then we invite other funds to look at their stuff. And so a lot of times it's sending them to pitch events or going to conferences where they can demo something. We do things in Georgia, South Carolina, Washington, California. And so sometimes it's just moving on with the pipeline. And then in return, we do talk to investors that ask about sort of our deal flow and what's coming up through our pipeline. And so we make those connections for them.
Do you consider that an angel fund or a pre-seed fund, or how would you describe that fund from a stage or sector point of view?
The fund that we have is definitely pre-seed fund. It's nowhere near as much money as we would like to have. We've talked about trying to do one in our local community, but probably need to scale that idea a little bit broader than Augusta, Georgia, and invite some investors from outside the region.
Oh, great. And so what exactly is your investment thesis for that group, and what's the criteria for actually funding a deal? What do they have to do to get the money?
I think the thing that we try and do is, one, because of the way the Clubhouse operates, we do ask that they become members of our space. Again, we are a collaborative workspace. And once they do that, they set up meetings with our mentors. If they've done a pitch deck or they need to improve the pitch deck, then we work with them on making sure that is a viable presentation of their company. We provide events for them to practice their soft skills to get in front of investors. We link them to other accelerator programs. We encourage them to go ahead and start the company, because a lot of times it's what we call entrepreneurs. And so unless they're just at the idea stage, we really want to see them move it up And then sometimes they don't even want an investment dollar per se. They really just want mentoring and customers. And so we help them work with that as well.
Can you talk about one or two portfolio companies that fit your funding thesis?
I think the robotics one is probably the biggest one. So Sumo Robot League actually started about 6 years ago, and it was literally solving the problem for, at that time, me and my business partner had middle school kids and we wanted them to do robotics. And the robotics programs that were here locally were either too expensive or they literally didn't exist. And so we started Sumo Robot League, and we've sold robots around the country and around the world. And it's a company that's grown slowly. It hasn't taken on any external investment dollars. But when you look at an affordable robot that teaches people to code in an actual language, it isn't in a space, it isn't in a niche of the STEM education platform that I think is really beneficial, particularly for middle and high schoolers.
Can you talk more about how the Clubhouse works? It appears to be a combination co-working space, a maker space, a code school, a startup accelerator, prototyping lab. You've taken a lot of different things and put into one group, and talk about how that works and what the advantage of that is.
Okay, well, that's a great question. So when we started in Augusta, I think it's sort of indicative of a lot of cities, whether they're rural or small, that don't have access to a lot of services that might be available in bigger urban cities. And so to start this space, it ended up being kind of the jack of all trades. And so we had the hackers, we had the makers, we had the investors, we had the programmers, and creating the space literally was the collision of all of those entities. And that's probably been the most wonderful thing that I've seen happen is finding the artists that are meeting the investors, that are meeting the soldiers, that are organizing with the caterer to put on an event, and then the investor is there. And so seeing the intersection of what that happens is literally why it was called the Clubhouse. We had 6 or 7 clubs that were meeting, in libraries and garages and the back of bars. And we were like, hey, you guys all need to get together and really share your ideas and share your resources. And I think you can appreciate sort of the idea that when people come together into a room and they share these ideas and things, that's where the magic happens. And so continuing to provide those resources. And again, there's a whole virtual community that has evolved between Zoom and meetups. But I think like seeing them eye to eye and having them talk about the things that they do together is really magical. And that's what the Clubhouse has been able to do. And we talk a lot about our community and about even the co-working space. It's not transactional, it's relationship driven. And so we really want you to come and be a part of our space and learn from each other and share best practices. And then having the equipment there really allows you to be creative, whether it's using our 3D printer or using our conference rooms or access to all of our technology, and then match that with our educators and our teachers. We're teaching people about how to do a better job with their company or their business. And that's where the code school comes in, because we actually teach coding in a 12-week boot camp. So yes, there are lots of facets to what the Clubhouse does. And I think that's kind of what makes our space unique, and it's the recipe for success.
Well, it sounds like a great opportunity to foster entrepreneurship because you're generating a lot of intersections between different disciplines, what some call convergence. And if you can do that in an efficient way, everybody in the same room or the same program, that makes for a lot of very interesting innovations to come out, as well as expanding learning. So we're not just thinking about the software, we're also thinking about the hardware implications and the market implications and the other aspects that go into that. And you can draw upon resources from those other groups. So it sounds like a great example of convergence working in your community there.
Yeah, one of the tools that we've taken advantage of, in particular when we're doing some virtual co-working lately, is we have a private Slack channel that we invite our members to, and we invite people that aren't members of the Clubhouse to be a part of. And so to see the banter on Clubhouse where people are asking a question, and again, because we're industry agnostic, you never know if somebody who's running a beauty company is going to need help from somebody who's running a life coach company. And then you might have the website designer in there helping them, and you're just watching the chatter on Slack. And so I think that seeing all of those things come together is really what's important for us moving forward.
Well, great. So what excites you right now?
I think what excites me right now is the prospect of expanding our code bootcamp The model that we have is really tied to helping people who are looking for a career change. It's one of the most affordable boot camps that exist right now. Model has gone from an in-person boot camp to a combination of in-person online. And so transitioning it to an online boot camp is something that we could see could exist in a lot of cities around the country. And when you talk about the assets that the Clubhouse has, our network is what makes a lot of this successful. And so connecting people to the jobs, whether they're virtual or contract or remote or part-time, I think is really important in this day and age, because so many times if you're working a minimum wage job, or even if you have recently been put out of work, this could be a game changer for you. And then the geography of where you are doesn't matter, because you have the aptitude, you have the distance learning, and then you have us as an organization and as a community who are really mentoring and connecting you. And again, that's the value proposition that we provide for this, that we see our students get educated and get connected. And then we combine that even with soft skills trainings. So really, helping them even start their first LinkedIn profile, or getting mentored from our alumni who've gone through our system. I think that's a real game changer. And we're really excited to expand and launch that, especially this year.
Sounds like a great opportunity. So you see a lot of startups coming through and a lot of investors coming through. What's your advice for people investing in startups? What do you tell them to do before they write that first check?
That's a great question. I think that the thing that we find is the investors are looking for an ROI. If they're committed to the company, we make the introductions. We have mentoring capabilities. And in some ways, we want to sit at the table as well. So we want to be part of the conversation. If you think of us as a funnel to connecting the investors and the startups, there's a value to what it is that we're doing. And that we see it time and time again. The investors want to help the startups. The startups want the help. And so we're the conduit between it. So getting the investors to help us help them, I think is the sweet spot.
Great. And then on the other side of that table, what's your advice for people running startups? What do you tell them to do before they launch that business?
The thing that we see the most time and time again, and it's amazing to me across all industries, is their lack of grit. And so it really discriminates against people who just sit back and say, oh, I have this great idea. I just need all this money to launch it. And we just go back and say, well, you need to go ahead and launch it with what you got. And them showing up, whether it's coming to our space or being in our event, or even something as simple as just returning an email, that to me is showing up. And so I think the startups will actually be more successful, and they'll see that it's not just about maybe what they're trying to do without the network, but I think working in conjunction with what the Clubhouse provides can make them more successful than they could think doing it on their own.
Well, great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I think I just want your community of listeners to see the spaces like ours around the country, whether it's the Clubhouse or other spaces in Texas or California or any state really that's rural or small. The entrepreneurs are out there, and they definitely need the connection to funding. And if you really, really want to help your community, whether it's economic independence or creating a generation of wealth, reaching out and mentoring companies that could just pick your brain and meet, whether it's over Zoom or for a cup of coffee, that could be really a game changer. Sometimes the startups, they don't need anything other than an ear. They need to hear from somebody who's done it before. They need to know that what they're doing is either working or not working. And a lot of times what we find is we can get them the introduction that they may not be able to get themselves. And I think that's the thing that goes both ways, because I think at the end of the day, the investors really want to help their community. They want to help the startups, and they want to help the person.
Absolutely. And it's a great opportunity that you're bringing there for your community. And I think it's a very interesting model how you've taken all the different elements of a coding school, makerspace, et cetera, and put them into one place, and then generating synergies and interactions that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And then it's just a practical thing to do in the smaller cities that are around the country, and potentially a great model for the rest of the rural communities to look at and learn from. In most rural communities, they just put a co-working space together and there you go, that's where we're done. But the reality is you've added other elements to it with these other combinations that really make it a much more interesting opportunity for your startups to grow and learn.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the one thing that we've also found is since we've started our space, the ebb and flow of the maker community. And so if you imagine just a few years ago how many maker spaces were available and how many assets were available online, and then it's unfortunate that the business model for sustaining a space doesn't always align with what the community actually wants, because it can't be volunteer driven. It can't be considered maybe a social service that's just going to ask for handouts. I think there really has to be a model, and that might be tied to their programming. And so that might be tied to their members, that might be tied to the events that they put on. And so one of the things that the Clubhouse also does is we mentor and groom other spaces that are like ours. We do get cities emailing us or reaching out to us from conferences and saying, how do we build a clubhouse in our community? How do we do what you guys are doing? Because we do it independent. We're not a government agency. And I think that the business model for keeping our doors open, literally and figuratively, is something that a lot of the cities can have if they don't already have it. And then they can be independent and still serve a really diverse audience, regardless of if it's a lifestyle business or a scalable business or quote, a small business. I think just the entrepreneurship training and the financial literacy and the basic model for how to run a business is important. And that is packaged in the way that what we do can be done in the hundreds of other cities in this country that really would like to have a co-working space or a maker space, or they'd like to have a coding school. Those are all ingredients that we would be happy to share with them.
Well, that's great. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, I believe you're going to post on your website our information about the Clubhouse. We do offer a newsletter. It's a nice little Monday morning information about what we do. They can visit our website. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm sure they can reach out to you, and then you can connect us.
Absolutely. We'll include those in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Well, thank you. I definitely appreciate it.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.